Welcome to the Now English Club. I'll try and get in focus here, or maybe I shouldn't. Maybe what I should do is tell you about what I'm going to be discussing. Chapter 1 of this book, Ian McEwan's Enduring Love. A lot of you are going to be studying at A level and perhaps revising, really trying to take in as much as you possibly can. And I'm just going to look at Chapter 1. I've got this technique that I picked up from a lecturer at university. It's a number and shape association technique. The number 1 apparently looks like a lighthouse. The number 2 looks like a swan. 3 is a backside if you turn it that way round. And number 4 looks like a boat. You've got to use your imagination for this. Number 5 is a pregnant stomach. Number 6 is a golf club. Number 7 a walking stick. Number 8 a pair of spectacles. Number 9 a balloon. And number 10 is a cricket bat and ball. And as you can see, I've linked these with some things that actually appear in Chapter 1 of Enduring Love, and it just helps you to remember stuff if you can just kind of paint pictures in your head, really. So with the lighthouse, I connected it with the flashback and ellipsis that occurs in Chapter 1. I don't know if you can see it on this list here, but it should be there. Look, the Heathrow flashback. Of course, in Chapter 1, that occurs about 3, 4, 5 pages in, I think. So that's one way to remember it. Is think of the lighthouse, and there's a flashing light on the top, so flashback, and Anna, who has epileptic fits, and ellipsis was with you when you had the flashback in the lighthouse, caused by the flashing light. Then swan, I've linked that with metafiction. Metafiction being, of course, this self-conscious use of self-conscious narrative, really, and that's pretty much not throughout the book, but it does happen from time to time in the book, and certainly happens in the first chapter. So looking at this. Where is it on there? Metafiction, holding back, delaying the information. That comes up. I forgot which page, but it's quite early on. So look for other instances of that. But that's Chapter 1. All these instances are from Chapter 1. All these examples. So number 3 is the backside. I'm sure some of you like that, and I've linked that with syntax. And some would say it's a sin to have a big backside, and you should eat less if that's indeed what you've got. I know it's easier said than done. Sometimes it's genetic, but anyway, just for the sake of this, let's call it a sin, and it's a taxable sin, so it's syntax. And syntax, of course, is the use of language, really. And I ran faster. Syntactically, is a very short sentence, and this short, breathless style increases attention in the novel. So don't forget about that. Syntax backside. The boat. Pathetic fallacy. That's an interesting one, because the pathetic fallacy in Chapter 1 occurs right at the beginning, because there's the oak tree, and I'm just looking for it on my notes here, but yeah, the oak tree protects Joe and Clarissa, and the very fact that the oak is supposedly protecting them is obviously exaggerated in a sense, because it's not exaggerated. It just sounds like as if it's actually come to life, which clearly it hasn't. So that's an example of pathetic fallacy. There other examples would be the sea smiled benignly, for instance. That's another example, but that's not in the book. So just stick with the oak protecting Joe and Clarissa from the wind and the elements. Then we've got number 5, the pregnant stomach. Well, with that, I linked that with shifting perspective, and the way I linked that is, of course, there's that shifting perspective. I don't need to consult my notes here. The buzzard, when you get the buzzard's eye view of what's going on, so it goes from Joe's perspective to the buzzard up there, much more omniscient. Because, of course, being a first-person narrative, you don't expect omniscience, but you kind of get a feel of omniscience because it's a buzzard circling up in the air. But looking at that, I'd have to say that the way it links with number 5 and the pregnant stomach is the shift in perspective would be the baby's also got a perspective. It's not just the mother, is it? It's the baby inside. So we could get a baby's eye view of stuff. Perhaps we wouldn't like to see that, but maybe one day it will be possible. But that's how I'd link it. Number 6, I've got the golf club. Number 6 supposedly looks like a golf club. You have to imagine that, otherwise this whole thing doesn't work. I'm trying to make it, yeah, there you can see it. And I've linked that with the bucolic and the pastoral romantic setting. And of course, a golf club is a very romantic setting, isn't it? When you think about it, you're strolling in the middle of nowhere, and there's sand pits, and there's lots of grass and trees, and very bucolic and pastoral. So another quite easy one to remember. And of course, the setting for Enduring Love right at the beginning is not a golf course, but they're out there in the Chiltern Hills, and it's all very rural and rustic and idyllic as well. And that all pretty much, again, think of the golf club, and I think you'll remember to include that. Then the number 7 is the walking stick. The walking stick here would be the intertextuality. And why do I say that? Well, the intertextuality in the book occurs because, of course, there's in chapter 1, because there's a mention about John Keats in Rome, and of course Keats was a famous romantic poet. And then, of course, there's Clarissa's name itself. It's reminiscent of, not reminiscent, exactly the same as Samuel Richardson's Clarissa, which, interestingly enough, has an epistolary structure, and that means it's kind of composed by using letters, really, not letters of the alphabet, but correspondence by mail. And that goes on as well in this book, and that's almost foreshadowing what's going to happen later. But it doesn't happen in the first chapter, but nonetheless, it's interesting that there's that intertextuality, to me, between this Enduring Love, chapter 1, and certainly with John Keats, and also to some extent there's that connection as well with Samuel Richardson. And as the book goes on, there's a lot more intertextuality that comes up. John Milton, Paradise Lost, that certainly comes up later on, not in this chapter though. So moving on, then we've got 8, the pair of spectacles. And well, I wanted to link it with something visual, so I took retrospective. Of course, that means looking back in time, and the retrospective nature of the piece is quite apparent early on. The protagonist is looking back on events that have already occurred. Of course, when it goes into flashback, it goes even further back in time. But that's another story entirely. Then the number 9 is the balloon. Can look like a balloon if you can draw. I can't draw, so don't expect me to do that. But the balloon, I considered throwing Gothic in there. Gothic isn't necessarily a genre that you'd be expected to know too much about, but I think you get brownie points if you throw it in, because there is certainly a touch of the Gothic throughout the novel. Gothic, the genre of Gothic, Gothic genre, Gothic novels, very much related to romantic novels, romantic with a capital R. And the example I've got here is the inarticulate fear that's mentioned. And of course, Gothic novels like Frankenstein always have this inexpressible emotion, and emotion's obviously part of the romantic movement. So you can see the connection between the romantic movement and the Gothic movement, which was kind of a strand of romanticism. And finally, I've got the cricket bat and ball. The cricket bat and ball, that really relates to, I'd put semantic field, because obviously you play cricket in a field usually, a big field, and you have fielders. And how about semantic fielders? That would be interesting. Well, this semantic field in chapter 1, it does vary throughout the novel. In chapter 1, it's not entirely a mathematical and scientific semantic field, but it is to some degree, because we've got comforting geometry and we've also got ruthless gravity. Both of those those words both those words, you wouldn't expect geometry to be used with the word comforting. So to some people, you might call that an oxymoron. It's almost a contradiction in terms, because if you're afraid of mathematics, you certainly wouldn't feel comforted by having geometry jumping out at you. But because Joe is a scientific writer, as we find out later in the novel, he finds geometry comforting. And anyway, so that's how you remember these things. If you do the 1 to 10 and relate it to key terms that you want to learn and remember, you will find that for most people, in fact, all the people that I've come across have found that it's much easier to recall stuff, certainly on a short-term basis. Maybe not so much long-term, but certainly short-term, you will have that recollection come to you much faster in an exam situation. If you need to remember more than 10 terms, then I suggest you think of all of those things: the lighthouse, the swan, the backside, the boat, the pregnant stomach, and so on, in normal weather conditions. Then for the number 11 to 20, think of the same things but in freezing weather, and for 21 to 30, think of the same things in hot weather. So hopefully that's going to help. Don't forget, there's an ebook. I'm going to put a link below to the ebook, and just going through it chapter by chapter, Enduring Love, and it's cheap at the price, and lots of exam tips in there, and hopefully it will get you through a difficult time, because obviously A-levels are always a time when you've got to revise as much as possible, and I really hope that my tips and my analysis, if you like, has been useful to you.